She sat quietly in seat 12F, her small backpack tucked under the seat and her hands resting on her lap. Most passengers did not notice her when they walked past. She looked like any other young traveler on a long flight, maybe going to meet family or returning from a school trip. She did not speak much, and she kept her headphones around her neck even though she was not listening to anything. She simply stared out the window at the airport lights while the crew prepared the aircraft for departure. The cabin was busy with the usual movement. People tried to fit bags into overhead bins, parents helped their children settle, and a few business travelers typed on tablets until the last minute. The flight attendants walked through the aisle with warm smiles, checking seatbelts and answering questions. Everything felt normal and routine. Nothing suggested that this flight would be remembered by every person on board. The girl in 12F kept watching the ground slowly roll away as the aircraft pushed back. Her expression was calm, almost too calm for someone her age. She took a slow breath when the engine started, as if she understood every detail of what was happening around her. But she did not show off any confidence. She did not try to get anyone's attention. She simply blended in, peaceful and unnoticed. When the aircraft took off, she held the armrest gently, not out of fear, but out of habit. She counted the seconds in her mind, almost matching the rhythm of the engines. A flight attendant noticed how focused she looked and smiled at her, but the girl only nodded politely. She did not try to make conversation. After the plane leveled at cruising altitude, the cabin lights softened and the passengers relaxed. Some slept, some watched movies, and some talked with their seatmates. The girl in 12F opened her small notebook and drew a simple sketch of the clouds outside. Her drawings were not perfect, but she seemed to enjoy making them. Occasionally she looked up, observing the cabin the way someone might observe a familiar place. She seemed comfortable, even though she was traveling alone. A man sitting across the aisle glanced at her a few times, wondering why such a young traveler moved with such confidence. He thought of asking her if she needed anything, but she looked completely fine. She had that quiet, self-reliant energy that made people assume she understood everything on her own. So he let her be. An hour passed without anything unusual. Drinks were served, children laughed softly, and the hum of the engines created a peaceful background. The girl in 12F removed her jacket, folded it neatly, and placed it behind her seat. When the aircraft experienced a slight bump of turbulence, she looked up immediately, not with fear, but with attention. Her eyes followed the overhead panel for a moment, and then she relaxed again. What no one knew was that she was listening to things others would never notice. She heard a slight change in the engine tone earlier. She heard the soft footsteps of someone moving toward the flight deck in a hurry. She saw the whispered conversation between two attendants near the galley. She saw how one of them glanced at the cabin with a worried expression before quickly hiding it behind a smile, but she did not react. She did not want to cause confusion. She kept calm the same way she had been taught by someone years earlier. Stay steady, stay aware. Wait for the moment you are needed. Another 20 minutes passed before something in the atmosphere of the cabin shifted. The girl noticed it before anyone else. An attendant who usually walked with confidence now moved a bit faster, like someone trying to hide concern. The senior attendant whispered something to her colleague, and the colleague's face tightened before she rushed forward. The passengers did not sense anything yet. They continued reading, chatting, or scrolling through phones. Everything still looked normal on the surface. The girl in 12F closed her notebook slowly. She knew something was wrong now. She sat up straight and listened more carefully. She had heard stories about flights facing unexpected situations. She knew that sometimes even the best crews needed help. She did not know what kind of help this flight might require, but she sensed a tension building in the air, something subtle but real. Suddenly, the cabin lights brightened slightly. The intercom clicked once, then twice. Passengers looked up, thinking it might be a simple announcement or maybe instructions for turbulence. Instead, a tense voice filled the cabin. It was the senior flight attendant, and her voice trembled just enough for the girl to understand the seriousness behind it. She was trying to stay calm, but she could not hide the urgency. "Ladies and gentlemen, if there is any licensed pilot on board, please press your call button immediately." The cabin froze. Every passenger looked around in shock, fear, and confusion. Some gasped. Some whispered. Some sat perfectly still. Only one person in 12F did not freeze. She knew this moment might come, and she knew it was her turn to stand up. Asterisk for a few seconds, no one moved. The call echoed through the cabin like something unreal. People exchanged confused looks, trying to understand why a flight at cruising altitude would suddenly need a pilot. The girl in 12F did not blink. Her breath stayed steady, almost too steady for someone her age. She knew she could not respond instantly, not while everyone was staring around nervously. So she waited, watching how the situation unfolded. A man in row 9 pressed his call button, but he lowered it again when his partner whispered something to him. Another passenger raised a hand halfway, then shook his head as if reminding himself he had only flown small recreational aircraft years ago. No one felt qualified enough. No one felt confident enough to stand up in front of hundreds of worried strangers. The flight attendant returned to the front. Passing the girl in 12F, the girl could see the tremble in her hands, even though she tried to hide it. Something serious was happening behind the flight deck door. Something the crew could not fix alone. Something they were now hoping a stranger on board could solve. The girl slowly reached for the zipper of her backpack. Not to pull out anything dramatic, but to check something she kept inside a small, worn-out patch with wings stitched on it. She touched it gently, almost like a habit of grounding herself. No one saw her do it. She made sure of that dot when the attendant passed by again. The girl raised her hand just a little. Not a full wave, not anything bold. Just enough to signal quietly without drawing attention. The attendant's eyes landed on her, expecting maybe a question or a concern. Instead, the girl spoke softly. "I think I can help." The attendant blinked, clearly confused. "Help? How?" she whispered. The girl did not answer immediately. She did not want others to hear. She leaned slightly toward the aisle and spoke in a voice so calm that it startled the attendant. "I'm trained. Not for commercial flights, but I can help. Please take me to the front." The attendant stared at her, uncertain whether to believe her. She was too young for anything that sounded like serious aviation experience. But something about her tone, her steady eyes, made the attendant pause. She had spoken with many nervous passengers over the years. This girl was not nervous. Not even a little. I'll check," the attendant whispered before hurrying forward. Still unsure, the girl sat back, her heart steady but her thoughts racing. She remembered the mornings she spent in small training rooms, listening to instructors explain what to do when things go wrong. She remembered the simulator sessions, the unexpected failures, the drills that tested her calmness more than her skill. She had never imagined using any of that knowledge here, in a real situation, at this altitude, surrounded by strangers. She did not want attention. She did not want applause. She only wanted the crew to get the help they needed before it was too late. The minutes felt longer as the flight attendant disappeared behind the curtain. Passengers whispered now, trying to guess the problem. Some thought the captain might be sick. Others feared a technical issue. Some simply stared forward, afraid to imagine the worst. After a moment, the senior attendant returned. Her eyes searched the cabin until they landed again on seat 12F. She walked straight toward the girl, her steps faster than before. "Can you please come with me?" she asked softly. The girl's expression didn't change. She stood up slowly, holding onto the seat in front so she wouldn't disturb anyone. A few passengers noticed her now, a quiet, young traveler walking calmly toward the front at a moment when the crew had begged for a pilot. They wondered why she was moving, but no one asked. Something about her pace and posture made people step aside automatically. As she reached the front section, the senior attendant lowered her voice again. Before I take you to the door, I need to ask. You said you're trained. What exactly does that mean? The girl looked at her, not arrogantly, not dramatically, just honestly. I've been flying small aircraft since I was very young. My guardian was a flight instructor. I know emergency procedures. I know how to handle cockpit communication. And I know how to stay calm. The attendant's eyes widened slightly. But you're still so young. The girl nodded. I know, but right now, someone has to step in. Another announcement crackled overhead, this time shorter and more urgent. Any qualified pilot, please come forward immediately. The attendant's decision was made in that moment. She opened the curtain and guided the girl through. Every passenger who saw them pass went silent, watching as the small girl from 12F walked toward the cockpit, not with fear, but with purpose. She stood in front of the locked flight deck door. For the first time, she took a deeper breath. Not because she was scared, but because she knew the next few minutes would change everything. The attendant knocked on the door in a coded rhythm. Inside. Someone answered, "Bring her in." The girl stepped forward. And the cabin behind her fell into complete silence. The moment the door opened. A rush of warm, tense air greeted the girl. She stepped inside quietly, and the flight deck closed behind her. The space felt smaller than she expected, filled with blinking lights, quiet alarms, and the heavy pressure of a problem no one had spoken aloud yet. The first officer sat in his seat, pale, breathing carefully, trying to hide the strain on his face. The captain was not in his seat at all. Instead, he sat half leaning against the side panel, one hand pressed against his forehead. He looked alert but unwell, struggling to stay focused. Even in that dim lighting, the girl could see he was fighting something he could not push through much longer. The first officer turned toward her, with a confused expression. At first, he expected a trained adult, maybe a retired pilot or someone from the military. But instead, a young girl stood there steady, calm, and not intimidated by the complexity around her. "You're the one who offered help?" he asked, unsure whether to be shocked or relieved. The girl nodded once. "I heard the call. I came as soon as I could." The captain looked up slowly, studying her. His voice was low but controlled. "How old are you?" She replied gently, "Old enough to know what to do, and young enough for people not to believe it." She paused for only a second. "Sir, tell me what happened." The captain tried to sit straighter. "The first officer is starting to feel dizzy. I thought it might be fatigue, but it's getting worse. And He stopped, breathing deeply. "I experienced something similar a few minutes ago. Not as strong, but enough that the crew noticed." The girl scanned the environment. The controls were steady. No unusual vibrations. No flashing emergency alerts. But something was clearly affecting the pilots physically. She remembered studying a scenario like this months ago, a rare situation, but not impossible. "Have you checked the supplemental oxygen?" she asked softly. The first officer blinked. "Yes, but only briefly. We didn't think it was that." He hesitated. "Should we check again?" She moved closer, her eyes scanning the overhead panel. She pointed. "The indicator is low. Maybe not dangerously low, but lower than it should be at this altitude." The captain looked at the readings with more focus. "We missed that earlier." "It happens," she said gently, "when you're busy trying to fly and handle everything else." The captain gave a small, tired smile at her calm tone. "You sound like someone who has been in here before." "I used to sit in a flight training center almost every weekend," she replied. "My guardian was very strict. He taught me to read every detail." She paused. "He also taught me to stay calm when others can't." The first officer reached for the oxygen mask, hands shaking slightly. She placed a hand near the panel, not touching, but guiding. "Here," she said softly. "Set it to full for a minute." He followed her instructions. His breathing steadied almost immediately. The captain did the same, and the color in his face began to return. The relief was visible, but the situation was still unstable. The captain exhaled slowly. "You may have just prevented this from getting worse." He looked at her more seriously now. "But we're not out of danger. I can't continue the flight alone. Not in this condition." The first officer nodded weakly. "And I can't stay at the controls right now." The captain turned fully toward the girl. "You said you've trained. What exactly can you do?" She stepped closer to the controls, careful not to touch anything yet. "I can monitor instruments. I can follow checklists. I can help with communication. And I can assist with manual control if needed." Then she added quietly, "I know you won't fully trust me. But you don't need to. I'm only here to support you." The captain studied her face again, not looking at her age anymore, but at her expression. She did not show fear. She did not show pride. She only showed a steady focus that felt stronger than most adults he had flown with. "Take the jump seat," he said finally. "I need another set of eyes. And I need someone who won't panic." The girl nodded and strapped herself into the small fold-down seat behind them. Her heartbeat remained calm, even as she sat inside a real cockpit for the first time in her life at cruising altitude. She watched the flight instruments closely. Everything looked stable, but she could feel something coming, something the passengers still did not know. The captain adjusted his headset and started a call to air traffic control. "Requesting medical support for crew impairment," he began. But before he could finish, an unexpected alert chirped on the panel. The girl looked up sharply. It was not an oxygen warning. It was something else. Something that made the captain freeze. Mid-sentence, the aircraft had drifted, just slightly, but enough for a monitoring system to trigger. The captain gripped the yoke. "I didn't move it." The first officer blinked, confused. "I didn't either." The girl felt a quiet chill run through her. That meant only one thing. Something else was affecting the aircraft, now. Something no one had expected. For a moment, no one spoke. The soft alert had stopped, but the meaning of it hung in the cockpit like a quiet warning. The captain steadied his hands on the controls, checking the readings again. The aircraft was still stable, still level, still holding altitude. But the drift shown on the monitor was real, a small movement, but one that did not match anything either pilot had done. The girl in the jump seat leaned forward slightly. Her eyes followed each detail on the panel, with a focus that surprised even the experienced crew. Something had caused that gentle sideways slide, and she wanted to understand it before it happened again. The captain tried the controls carefully. Everything responded normally. The first officer reached for a secondary system, testing it as well. Still normal. Yet the unease remained. "What did you feel just before it drifted?" the girl asked softly. The captain looked at her. "Honestly, nothing. I didn't touch anything. It was like the aircraft corrected itself for something I didn't command." The girl thought for a long moment. Sometimes a small pressure change outside can cause it. But that alert shouldn't trigger unless the movement lasts longer than a second. The first officer nodded weakly. So something lasted longer. The girl looked at the captain. "Were you both wearing oxygen masks when it drifted?" The captain hesitated. "I had just put mine on. And you?" she asked the first officer gently. "I had mine on for maybe 20 seconds. She took a breath. "Then that movement wasn't because of either of you." The cockpit fell silent again. Not fearful silence, focused silence. The captain reached for the communication switch. "We need to inform ground control. We have a minor flight control anomaly." But the girl lifted a hand. "Wait, just for a moment." He looked back at her, surprised. "Why?" "I want to check something first. If we report now, they might ask for procedures that will distract both of you. But if it's something small and fixable, we should understand it before alarming them." The captain paused. He did not like ignoring protocol, but something about her calm reasoning felt solid. "What do you want to check?" He asked. She pointed at a subtle reading next to the yaw damper indicator, a slight fluctuation, barely visible. "That number shouldn't be changing at all during smooth cruise," she explained softly. "It means the system is compensating for something. Maybe wind, maybe turbulence, or maybe a gradual imbalance." The first officer frowned. "Fuel imbalance?" She nodded. "Maybe not serious yet. But if one wing becomes slightly heavier, even a little, the aircraft could drift." The captain immediately checked the fuel status. He stared at the readings for several seconds, his eyes narrowing. "There's a small difference," he said quietly. "Very small, but unusual for this stage of flight." The girl nodded again. If the aircraft corrected for that, the alert might have triggered. Relief washed over the cockpit, but only slightly. Fuel imbalance was not catastrophic, but it required attention. The captain lowered his voice. "If you're right, we can manage it. But we still need to understand why the fuel shifted." The first officer adjusted the screen. Maybe the automatic balancing didn't activate. The girl watched him work, then spoke gently. "Can I help with the checklist?" The captain hesitated for only a moment. She had already proven herself calm and observant. And they needed extra hands, or rather, an extra mind. "Go ahead," he said. She opened the laminated checklist carefully. It was heavier than she expected, filled with procedures she had only studied, but never used in real flight. But her training, her guardian's strict teaching, and her own memory guided her now. She read each line clearly, steady, without rushing. The captain followed her instructions while the first officer managed the balancing system manually. Slowly, the imbalance began to correct, but then something unexpected happened. A voice came through the radio sharp. Urgent, and from another aircraft. "Control. We're picking up unusual movement from a flight ahead of us. Are they experiencing turbulence?" The captain and first officer exchanged tense looks. The girl's eyes widened just slightly. Someone else had noticed their drift. Before the captain could reply, air traffic control responded. "We have no turbulence reports in that area. Stand by while we contact the flight." The captain inhaled deeply. "They're going to call us now." The girl looked at him. "Are you ready to answer? Both of you just stabilized your oxygen levels. It might still affect concentration." The first officer leaned back, exhausted. "I can't talk to them. I'm still not steady." The captain reached for the headset, but his hand trembled again, not from fear, but fatigue still lingering from earlier. The girl watched him, her mind moving quickly. She knew what she had to do. "Sir," she said softly, "I can handle the first part of the communication. Just the acknowledgement. You can guide me on what to say." The captain turned slowly toward her. "You want to answer ATC?" "Only the simple part," she said calmly. "Just enough to buy you time." The radio crackled. "Flight. Please confirm your status." The captain looked at the girl. The girl looked at the captain. He lowered the headset into her hands. "Go ahead," he said quietly. "Keep it steady." She placed the headset over her ears. She pressed the button. And with a calm, clear voice that no one in the cabin knew she possessed, she spoke her first words to the sky. Asterisk, the headset felt heavier than the girl expected. Not because of its weight, but because of what it meant. She took a slow breath, letting the steady hum of the cockpit settle inside her, and pressed the button on the radio panel. "Control, this is the flight," she said softly, her voice calm but steady. "We read you. Her tone was so controlled, so professional, that even the captain lifted his eyebrows slightly in surprise. The girl did not sound like a child speaking through a radio. She sounded like someone who had trained for this moment, someone who understood the sky more deeply than most passengers ever would. Air traffic control responded almost instantly. We received a report of slight movement from another aircraft. Can you confirm whether you're experiencing turbulence or any unexpected behavior? The girl looked at the captain. He nodded gently, guiding her. Tell them we are assessing systems, he whispered. She pressed the button again. Control, we are assessing our systems. No severe turbulence reported on our end. There was a pause on the radio, followed by, copy, keep us updated. The girl released the button and exhaled slowly. That alone would have been enough responsibility for most adults, but she did not shake, not even a little. She removed the headset carefully and handed it back to the captain. You did well, he said quietly. She nodded, but she didn't smile. Not yet. The situation was still fragile. The first officer watched her with a tired, yet amazed look. How did you stay so calm? The girl looked down for a moment, then answered simply. I practiced for years with someone who never allowed panic. He said the sky listens to your heartbeat. If your heartbeat is steady, the sky stays steady too. The captain's expression softened. It was the first moment in the last hour that felt human rather than procedural. He cleared his throat and turned back to the screens. Fuel imbalance is almost corrected. Good work, all of you. But just as he finished speaking, the aircraft dipped, not sharply, not dangerously, but enough to make the instruments jump slightly. Even in the cabin, passengers felt it. Some gasped softly. Others gripped armrests. A few instinctively looked toward the front, as if expecting answers. In the cockpit, the girl's eyes snapped to the altitude indicator. That wasn't turbulence, she said quietly. The captain agreed. It felt like a speed fluctuation. The first officer checked his readings again. Airflow looks normal. But the girl saw something they didn't. The airspeed was not dropping, it was surging for a moment, then settling again. Can that happen because of the earlier oxygen issue? She asked. The captain shook his head. That shouldn't affect airspeed like that. She leaned forward, studying the panel more closely. There was nothing obvious. Nothing loud. Nothing flashing. Just subtle changes, small movements that only someone paying extreme attention would notice. Soft knock sounded at the cockpit door. The captain exchanged a surprised look with the first officer. Who is that? The senior flight attendant's voice came through softly. Captain, the passengers felt that last movement. They're getting nervous. The captain pressed the intercom. His voice stayed calm, though he was still recovering. Tell them it was a normal correction. No need to worry. The girl could imagine the attendant nodding even though she couldn't see her. But then another sound came from outside. The cockpit, not from the door. Not from the cabin, but from the aircraft itself. A subtle vibration, barely there, but real. She had felt it once before in a simulator, a scenario designed to test attention to detail. A faint tremor, a quiet hum. Something almost like the aircraft clearing its throat before announcing a problem. The girl spoke carefully. Sir. Check the secondary pitot readings. The captain froze. He checked. Then his face changed, not fear, but realization. The first officer looked, too. No, that can't be right. The girl felt a chill of recognition. She knew what it meant, even if she had never experienced it in real life. One of the pitot systems, the small sensors that tell the aircraft its airspeed, was giving inconsistent data, not failed, not broken, but unstable. If it worsened, the aircraft could misread its own speed. And that was a problem every pilot feared. The captain leaned back, breathing slowly. We need to stabilize this. If the readings drift too far apart, the system will start compensating at the wrong time. The first officer tried the reset sequence, but his hands still trembled. "I can do it," the girl said softly. The captain looked at her again, this time not surprised that she understood the situation, but grateful she did. "You know the sequence?" he asked. She nodded. "I practiced it a lot." He stepped aside slightly, giving her space. She didn't touch anything without permission. She waited until he said, "Go ahead." Then she began the manual reset sequence, slow, careful, exact. The same way her guardian had drilled it into her. The same way she had practiced until her fingers memorized it. When she finished, the readings steadied. Not perfect, but steady. The captain let out a breath he had been holding for far too long. "You just prevented a much bigger problem." The girl returned to the jump seat quietly. But inside the cabin, passengers were whispering again, because the flight attendant had come out of the cockpit pale-faced. People asked her, "Is something wrong?" And she made the mistake every crew member fears making. She hesitated before answering. Now the whole cabin knew something was wrong, even if they didn't know what. And in the cockpit, the radio suddenly came alive again. "Flight. You are now being shadowed by another aircraft on a parallel route. They report you're drifting slightly off track." The captain turned slowly toward the girl. "You fixed one problem," he sighed, "but something else is still affecting us." The girl tightened her seatbelt. She had a feeling the real challenge was only beginning. The cockpit grew quieter than ever before, as if even the aircraft itself was listening. The captain stared at the navigation display, watching the subtle drift happen again, so slight that an untrained eye would miss it. But the aircraft shadowing them on a nearby route had noticed. Air traffic control had noticed. And now the crew could no longer hide from the fact that something deeper was unfolding. The girl in the jump seat leaned forward, studying the instruments with sharp detail. The readings were steady, but the motion was not. It did not match turbulence, wind, or mechanical imbalance. It was something else, something that did not follow any simple pattern. The captain looked at the girl. "What do you think we're dealing with?" She hesitated, not because she didn't know, but because she wanted to choose her words carefully. "Sir, I think the aircraft is responding slower than usual. Not failing, not losing control, just late." The first officer frowned. "Late?" She nodded. "Like when you tell it to stay level, it listens, but 1 second after it should." The captain's expression sharpened. "Lag in response." The girl took a slow breath. "Yes, and that's why it feels like drift. It corrects, but not at the right moment." The first officer rubbed his forehead, still weak but thinking clearly now. "If that's true, then the issue isn't the controls or the engine or the fuel. It's the internal logic," the girl said softly. "The part that reads the inputs and reacts." The captain stared at her. "You're saying the aircraft's brain is slow?" She didn't answer with words. She simply looked at the central system panel, the one that managed flight data. The captain followed her gaze, and his face changed again. A quiet, almost invisible warning blinked on the corner of the screen. Not a loud alarm, not a flashing danger sign, just a maintenance message that most people would ignore. Data SYNC delayed non-critical, non-critical. The first officer repeated under his breath. "They always say non-critical until it becomes critical." The girl looked at the captain. "Sir, we need to reduce the load on the system. Just a little. It's overwhelmed. If we ease the pressure, it will respond faster." The captain nodded slowly. "A small altitude adjustment, and a reduced cruise speed. That's what I would try," she said gently. He trusted her now, not blindly, but logically. She had spotted every subtle clue before anyone else. So he made the call, requesting minor altitude change for system calibration. He told a TC, ATC approved it immediately. The captain adjusted the controls, easing the plane into a lower altitude by a few hundred feet. For a moment, the aircraft felt smoother, calmer. The girl watched the drift indicator with careful eyes. Then something happened that none of them expected. It stopped drifting. Completely. The girl exhaled softly. It's working. But the relief lasted only seconds. A new sound came from the cabin, this time louder, closer, filled with rising panic. Someone shouted. Not in fear of turbulence. Not in fear of the unknown. But in fear of what they believed was happening. What's going on? Why is the plane moving like that? Why isn't the captain saying anything? We saw the attendant come out of the cockpit. Something's wrong. The voices grew louder, overlapping, breaking the calm like cracked glass. The senior flight attendant knocked again, voice tense. Captain, passengers are standing. They feel something is wrong. We need instructions. The captain glanced at the girl. She knew what he was thinking. If he made an announcement now, his voice might reveal more than he wanted. He was still recovering. Still pale. Still fighting the effects of earlier. And the first officer was in no condition to speak to the entire cabin. The girl felt her heart tighten. She didn't want attention. She didn't want everyone looking at her. But she also understood something clearly. Stressed passengers could turn a manageable situation into a crisis. She unbuckled slowly. Sir, she said softly. Let me talk to them. The captain looked stunned. You want to address the cabin? She nodded. Not about the technical things. Just to calm them. Just to help them breathe. The first officer whispered, They'll ask who you are. I'll tell them the truth, she replied simply. That I'm assisting. That I'm here to help the crew. That everything is under control. The captain looked at her for a long moment. He saw something in her that went beyond training. Something that made her braver than her age suggested. Are you sure you can handle it? He asked softly. She took a slow, steady breath. My guardian always said, she whispered. A calm voice is stronger than a loud alarm. The captain finally nodded. Go, he said. She opened the cockpit door for the first time since she entered it. The noise of the passengers filled the small space, instantly worried voices, nervous breaths. Restless movements. Everyone saw her step out. A girl. Small, quiet, alone. The last person anyone expected. The cabin froze, not in panic, but in complete confusion. She walked forward a few steps. Steady, calm, even though hundreds of eyes were now staring at her. She raised her hand slightly, not to demand attention, but to offer comfort. Her voice was soft, but every person in the aircraft heard her. Please stay seated, she said gently. Everything is under control. The crew is working on it. No one is in danger. Please trust us. A hush fell over the cabin, because there was something in her tone that even adults didn't have. Not fear, not uncertainty, only truth. A man stood up shakily. Who are you helping? She met his eyes without hesitation. The people flying this plane, she said simply. And right now, they need all of us to stay calm. For the first time since the alert, the passengers sat down, not because they were forced to, but because a young girl told them to, and they believed her. She turned back toward the cockpit, but she stopped, because out of the window, she saw something she did not expect. Shadow. Moving alongside them, not another passenger. Aircraft. Something faster, something sharper, something that made the captain's earlier words echo in her mind. You're being shadowed. She looked through the window, eyes widening, and she whispered softly to herself. That's not a passenger plane. Asterisk. She froze for only a heartbeat as she stared out the window. The shape flying beside them wasn't large. It wasn't painted like a commercial aircraft. It moved smoother, cleaner, almost gliding. It kept perfect distance, Neither too close nor too far. It was not threatening. It was watching. She stepped closer to the window, narrowing her eyes. The aircraft made a small adjustment in altitude, matching theirs instantly. It wasn't a fighter jet, nothing sharp or aggressive, but a fast response. Observation aircraft used when ground control needed eyes in the sky. She understood now. They hadn't been sent because the plane was unsafe. They had been sent because the world below had noticed something unusual, and they wanted to make sure the flight stayed steady. The passengers whispered behind her, "What is that plane? Is it helping us? Why is it flying so close?" The girl turned toward them, her voice calm again. "It's just monitoring. It means they care about our safety." She gave a gentle smile. "It means we're not alone up here." Some passengers finally breathed again. Others watched her with new respect, realizing she wasn't just a quiet traveler anymore. She was someone who had stepped up when adults couldn't, someone who gave them calm when fear tried to take over. She walked back into the cockpit, closing the door softly behind her. The captain looked at her immediately. "Passengers settled?" She nodded. "Yes, and sir, the aircraft beside us is a monitoring team. They're just making sure everything stays stable." The captain nodded with relief. "Good, that means the situation is being handled from all sides." The first officer added, "We're getting our strength back too." Oxygen helped more than expected. The girl settled into the jump seat, checking the instruments again. The drift indicator stayed still, steady, clean. The pitot readings held firm. The altitude stabilized. Even the faint tremor she had noticed earlier was gone. "It's holding," she said softly. The captain smiled, this time without tension. "Because of you." She shook her head. "Because we worked together." For a quiet moment, the three of them simply listened to the hum of a stable aircraft. A sound that felt like hope returning. Then the radio came alive again. "Flight, your systems appear stable. You are cleared to continue to destination. Support aircraft will stay nearby until descent." The captain replied, "Copy that." He turned to the girl again. "We'll be landing in about an hour, but there's something I need to say before that." She looked up gently. "You didn't just help," he said. "You didn't just advise or support us. You carried this cockpit when we were unable to carry ourselves. I've flown for many years, and I've never seen someone this calm at this age." The first officer added with a tired smile, "You saved this flight in more ways than you know." The girl lowered her eyes, not out of shyness, but humility. "My guardian always said, if you can help even once, you should. And if no one expects you to, that's even better." The captain laughed softly, relief finally washing over him. "Your guardian raised someone remarkable." She didn't answer, but her small smile said enough. As the aircraft descended, the passengers felt the change. The engines softened, the cabin lights brightened slightly, and the world outside shifted from endless sky to the first shapes of land and lights below. When the wheels touched down, the landing was one of the smoothest the crew had ever made, steady, quiet, confident. The passengers applauded, not because they always do after a landing, but because they felt grateful in a way words couldn't explain. When the aircraft turned toward the gate, the monitoring plane dipped its wings in a respectful gesture before flying away. The girl noticed it from the cockpit window and smiled. "That was for you," the first officer said softly. The girl didn't respond. She didn't need to. Once parked, the captain made an announcement. His voice was stronger now. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience today. We experienced a technical issue that required teamwork. And I want to say, someone on this flight showed extraordinary calm and courage. We're safe on the ground because of that." The passengers clapped again, louder this time. But none of them knew he was looking at the girl in the jump seat. When she walked out of the cockpit, every head turned. People whispered, pointed softly, and smiled with gratitude. But she didn't lift her chin or walk proudly. She simply moved down the aisle in the same quiet way she had boarded soft steps. Small backpack, peaceful eyes. A woman near the front asked her, "How did you stay calm?" The girl replied gently, "Someone once told me, a calm heart can steady a whole sky." And she walked out of the aircraft into the bright daylight, unnoticed by most of the world, but unforgettable to every soul on that flight.